Perfect. So now we're ready to introduce our panelists. I'm going to go in chronological order in which the panelists appear on my screen. So first up, we have Emma.
Yeah, hi everyone. I was involved with AstroSoc during my undergraduate degree at Birmingham. I was the outreach officer and then the chair in my sort of third and fourth years.
Dan?
Hi, I'm Dan. I've just graduated from a Master's in Particle Physics at Birmingham, and during my time at Birmingham, I spent quite a bit of time cooperating with the society, never in an explicit committee role, but technically so. Like I was doing a lot of talks and reach outs and contributing wherever possible.
Thank you. Toots?
Hi everyone, great to see you all. So I'm Toots. Well, yeah, you all can call me Toots. I was the chair in 2019 and 2020. I was the chair of the AstroSoc, and then 2 years before that, I was also the secretary. So it's great to be here today.
Thank you. Sean?
Hi, I'm Sean Avidge. I'm a lecturer at the university in space environment. And I was on the AstroSoc committee from 2007 until about 2012 or 13. The years sort of merge into one in various roles. I think I was chair and secretary and outreach officer at various points in that time period.
That's great. And Professor Trio?
Hi, so I'm Amory. I'm a professor here in exoplanet studies. And interestingly, I was also an AstroSoc member, but not at Birmingham, but at the University of St. Andrews, where I held the role of editor. So we had a magazine, and I was the editor of our magazine.
That's wonderful to know. And to add on to that, Professor Trio is also our patron, and he also gave a talk recently about exoplanets, which is his specialty. So if you have any questions about exoplanets, slip them into the chat and we will try to get Professor Trio to answer them for us today. So that being said, I'm just going to give you a brief outline about the way things will run tonight. We're going to have a discussion with about 3 to 4 short questions to get to know our panelists' career journey and a bit more about their involvement with AstroSoc and how it influenced their involvement with outreach or just their careers in general. Following this, we will be asking the questions that you have sent over to us, and our panelists will share their views on them. First question, this is a general question for all the panelists. What is your current career stage? And could you please share a glimpse of your career journey? Once again, I'll probably go in the same order that I went through the introductions with. Emma?
Yeah, so I, in October, started the second year of my PhD. I'm still at Birmingham in the Sun, Stars and Exoplanets research group, and I'm specializing in a thing called galactic archaeology and a bit of stellar physics as well. Immediately before the PhD, I completed an integrated master's at Birmingham in straight physics. So I wasn't an astrophysics student, but I went into an astrophysics PhD.
That's great. And what about you, Dan?
So I've just graduated from the University of Birmingham in August, and I've just started a PhD at the University of Oxford working with the LZ experiment, which is a particle physics experiment, but it is attempting to directly detect dark matter. So it does have links to cosmology and astrophysics, and I constantly come back to do talks for AstroSoc on that subject, and they can't get rid of me. So
that's wonderful to know. As a particle physics student myself, I can completely relate to that. Toots?
Hi guys, yes, same as then. I've started my PhD technically past year in October. It's my first year. Well, it's going well, I think. And immediately before that, I've graduated from University of Birmingham from astrophysics, master's degree. In fact, I was firstly involved in straight physics, and then I switched to astrophysics when I was deeply inspired and amazed in my first year in University of Birmingham, because there were so many seminars and talks were going on. So yeah, currently I'm doing my PhD basically. So I'm still new in the field.
That's great. Sean?
Yeah, so I guess from where I started, I'm one of these people that you introduced at the start as not having to be an AstroSoc person who's a physicist. So I was an undergrad at Birmingham. I did maths, and then I did my PhD in Birmingham, which was sort of my stepping stone. I did a bit of maths and physics, and then for postdocs and then later into my lectureship, I focus on the space environment. So space weather, how the sun, what it's doing and how it interacts with the Earth's upper atmosphere, and primarily interested in the modeling of that environment so we can then do something about it. So you find in space environments, some people are interested in the physics end, and we do some of that in Birmingham, and then some people we might be interested in the applications end, and it's a spectrum. But I've tried to sit more on take the mathematical model and do something useful with it at the end. But yeah, I mean, all the way, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, as I said, I started off doing maths, then I guess AstroSoc can be blamed for my conversion from the pureness of mathematics into this dirtier subject that you all do. So maybe I'm on the wrong side of that argument. I see Murray's face. Yeah, anyway. That's like 10 years of AstroSoc being picked on, you see, as being the only mathematician in the room. I have to vent it when I'm then with others.
That's really nice. And it's kind of beautiful, to be honest, to see how all these different disciples come in for, astronomy or for the advancement of, I guess, understanding of science and outreach. Amaury, what about you?
I will say, contrary to Sean, that I've been serving the beautiful muse of astronomy ever since. And I was an undergrad at St. Andrews, then I did a PhD at the University of Geneva. Then after that, I had postdoctoral positions in Geneva at MIT and Canada at the University of Toronto. Then I went to Cambridge before I joined Birmingham about 3.5 years ago.
That's really exciting to know. That blends in quite nicely to our next question, which is, what has been your former involvement with AstroSoc, and how did this influence your career or your involvement with science outreach? Emma?
I guess we all kind of answered this question at the beginning, but I'll just say again, because I noticed some extra people joining. So I think in 2017-18, I was the outreach officer, and 2018-19, I was the chair. I think AstroSoc gives you a great opportunity to do all of the things which are usually associated with being on a student committee, which are, practicing time management, getting involved in running projects, that kind of thing. But the thing you mentioned, the outreach, was one of the best things that I got involved with, and has led into doing lots of outreach as a PhD student as well. I think as scientists or anybody in a technical role, which probably most people who do technical degrees go on to follow, the most important thing that you can do is communicate whatever you find out. There's no point doing science if you can't tell anyone about it, and being involved in things like outreach with AstroSoc is a great way of practicing that skill right from the start of your degree. So yeah.
That's great. And Dan, I know you have been involved with outreach for AstroSoc quite a bit in a number of our events. Do you feel like that has benefited your scientific development journey?
I could go one further than that potentially and say that it's because of AstroSoc that I'm probably in the PhD course that I am right now. Over the course of helping out with AstroSoc, because my entire house were AstroSoc committee members for the last couple of years, I did a number of events, talks for AstroSoc, and one of these was on dark matter and how to detect it. And while researching this and combining this with some of my other internship work I'd done in the past with NewsG at the University of Birmingham, I decided that I had much more of an interest in the field of dark matter detection and applied for an LZ PhD. And here I am. So definitely gets you places.
And how did you go about getting to give these talks for AstroSoc on dark matter or other topics of your interest?
It was mostly just a process of helping out with events as an honorary committee member, the joke was at the time. And from this, just taking any opportunity I could to help out. And one of these opportunities was just that someone had accidentally dropped out of one of the potential talks for the term. And the opportunity just kind of presented itself. So it could happen to you.
That's nice. So I guess if I was to take one key point away from that, then that would be networking and actively looking for these opportunities. Toots, what about you? You have been our chair for the last academic year. So not this academic year, the previous one. And before that, you were also, I believe, secretary. And how did you find the whole journey, and did it influence your decision to get a PhD?
Well, so not just a PhD, in fact, like going with astronomy, as I said, there were so many seminars, which one of them was, I can't remember his name, but it was about black holes and gravitational waves. It was one of the first years that it was like the big thing. So there was one Astronomy in the City gravitational wave special sort of title. And when I didn't get involved, I was just attendee by then, but I was very like curious what are these people are doing in terms of like the committee members. You know, I was very like interested in seeing how did you guys get involved with these people, and like basically I was very into knowing what AstroSoc is. And then I got involved with AstroSoc, and then everything sort of followed it through that I wanted to like stay in the astronomy. So I switched my course, and then continuing in committee, it gave me so much opportunities to networking with people, gave me so much opportunities to get involved in public. And I think I agreed to Emma on that by saying there's no point in science if you can't share it with someone. And I think researching is not just about sitting on your desk 24/7 and doing coding. It's about networking with people. It can be your academics, like other academics from other universities, and it's also involves in public so much, which we call outreach. So basically, being involved in those activities kept me inspired, if I'm making sense. So I basically wanted to stay in the field. Like they were approaching me and asking like mere basic questions, sometimes about dark energy, which I have no clue. But like in general, like receiving those questions, there was always satisfying about staying like in that environment. So I felt like I meant to basically stay in academia, which is, yeah, where am I currently. So AstroSoc actually has a big impact on my current life. I can positively say that.
And if you don't mind, could you maybe share a little bit more about how you became a committee member for AstroSoc?
It was actually a very fast transition. So I wasn't a member yet. And I just joined one of the events. I think it was like, it was one of the former chairs, Alice's talk. And she was just advertising that we have committee roles available and etc. And I was like, okay, I'm not even a member, but I'm considering joining for being a committee member. And then, yeah, it happened very fast. I've approached to you guys, to the committee back then. I've helped for one of the Astronomy in the Cities, which was one of my second, not the first. It was the second. I went to observatory that day. I was very like amazed. I was on the clouds basically. So I went to observatory. I helped out. I was even receiving some questions from like public because they didn't know I'm new. So after that day, I think I was sure that I wanted to go for a committee member because I really like, in general, helping out with things. So I felt very useful and I felt very inspired. So a combination of that kept me in the committee, and they voted for me. So
that's always nice.
Yeah.
In fact, that kind of reminds me of how I ended up joining the committee. I attended one event last year in person. This was probably one of our last in-person events before the lockdown. And it was, I believe it was Cressida's talk on galaxies. And I do not want to pinpoint the topic because I'll probably get it wrong. But yeah, it was a talk about galaxies. And then we also had, I think you also gave a talk about the physics of some movies and around the theme of physics and astrophysics. And it was after that I attended just, one or two sessions, and then the AGM came up and I just felt inspired that that is the team that I want to work with. This is the committee that I kind of, see myself doing outreach with. And I can assure you from personal experience as well, it has been incredibly rewarding. Sean, your journey your involvement with AstroSoc might differ a little more than what our previous panelists have said, but how has AstroSoc influenced your career choice or your career path?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it is that, it's not that dissimilar, really. When I started at university, I can't say I went out of my way to look to join AstroSoc. In fact, in Freshers Week, it was the first society in the tent. So I guess I was just very lazy. Got accosted by the chair at the time. And then the first event we had when I was an undergrad was when Brian Cox gave the T-Talk and Telescope. It was pre Brian Cox being famous Brian Cox. We tried to get him a few times since, but couldn't afford it. So he gave a really good talk and then went to the pub afterwards, as is right and proper. And that was it really. That descended into being secretary a few months later, and then you just sort of go around, don't you? Do different jobs. Doing a PhD means you again don't escape. I mean, and in fact, AstroSoc has a fantastic record for chairs going on to do PhDs. I mean, I may have lost track over the last couple of years, but we were on something like 13 or 14 in a row. And I'm guessing from at least 2 previous people who have just been speaking that we can't be far off a pretty continuous record there, which is pretty good. And yeah, I think it had a huge influence in 2 ways. I think I'm only repeating what Emma's just said, really, in that in terms of outreach, you do there's just so many opportunities to talk at AstroSoc, and actually that's a great skill that I think really helped me, is that you can give talks as an undergrad in a safe space, and you can get things wrong and you work out actually that doesn't really work as a way of presenting something, and you get better. The only way to get better is through practice, right? And you do PhDs and you have to give talks and stuff, but there's a difference when you can try and talk into a sort of more generalist subject, and then just loads of opportunities came up. I mean, we've had the Venus transit, well, we had 2 of them. We had 2004 and 2012. With BBC came and ITV came. We had BBC Stargazing Live on campus, and it gave us an opportunity to just really pull all of that sort of outreach experience, which was great. And then when it came to doing a PhD, as I said, my undergrad was in pure maths, and I think it was AstroSoc, non-jokingly aside, that really inspired me to want to change track. And we had one particular T-Talking Telescope by a guy who talked on the subject, which I now do. So yeah, it's, I think, hugely influential, and just really positive. I mean, I write it on my CV, so it must be pretty good.
That's really exciting to know, and it's really nice to see how the sort of motivation and the inspiration turn has been kind of similar for all former committee members, and AstroSoc has definitely helped shape career choices. Amaury, as our patron, you have given a couple of talks for us in the past, and many of our students have engaged with the content that you have shared. And would you have anything more to add on to that? And how has your experience interacting with students from an outreach perspective been so far?
Yeah, thanks. No, I don't have too much to add, except that when AstroSoc asked me to become patron about a year after I arrived, which made me feel very welcome to Birmingham. That was really nice. Was that you responsible, Emma? I see you smirk. Oh yeah, maybe.
Well, it's voted for by the committee, but
I see.
I might have put your name on the list.
Right. Well, then now I'm happy to be the patron again and engaging with you. Certainly, from being an AstroSoc member at St. Andrews, I liked as a student when staff were engaging with us. I also completely relate with what Emma said and Sean echoed on outreach. I think that's through AstroSoc that I learned how to choose words in order for what we describe of the heavens to have an impact on people and share what we like, what we love, and try to transmit that to a new generation. And so certainly it's nice to engage continually with you. I think at the moment, last summer, for instance, Luke was working with me and with Maddie in trying to turn the telescope of the university, and that it will become robotic, hopefully in the not too distant future, such that AstroSoc can also conduct original research. And so the idea is to blend this access to the public as well as a more formal, maybe research aspect as well. And I think having those two would be fantastic.
That's really exciting to hear. And given that, I mean, if we can get that set up and running for the near future, then that is something that a lot of our members would really enjoy. And it would be a chance to expand astronomy beyond just the physics department and STEM departments potentially as well.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, I believe Sean has some slides for us to share, and with some pictures from his time in AstroSoc.
Yeah, so I mean, I've just got a few pictures. They're not all from my time. I'm not that old. But while I was searching through to pull some photos, I thought, well, there's a chance that perhaps some people won't have seen all of these. So I'll apologize to the people that have already seen things. Now, if I will master how to, sorry. I've clearly too many tabs open. There we go. Can you see those? Yes, took a nod. Okay, so as I'll just power through some, and then later at the end, if anyone wants any intro information, they can always ask for some. So I thought I'd start with some actual observing things before I get off topic. And what I found while going through my files was an attempt we had from, this was obviously before the West Hills upgrade. This is the old Meade telescope. We were trying to build up the whole Messier catalogue. We haven't got that far off a complete set, but I thought I would pull out 8 or so there of my favourite ones, which we took just at the observatory over the couple of years. I'm not sure actually what this entire span range of the years, probably about 2005 to 2010 or 11 or so. I guess these are taken over. So we have the traditional astronomy set of pictures, and perhaps M104 maybe my favorite actually, but as a sample of things. So that's the proper side of AstroSoc, maybe I'll say that. I think I noticed that you had, or tried recently, maybe tried is the right word, to have your annual space race. Well, I guess that was last year when it was happening. And I do have at least 2 pictures from the first annual space race. And I should point out that when we had this first one, we did call it the first annual one, with the idea that it would just make people make it an annual event. And see, clearly that was successful in our trickery of naming. And I also here took from some of the old AstroSoc newsletters some various drinks. There's actually a surprisingly large number of drinks on the newsletters over the years. So I've pulled it down to these 3, and perhaps just the AstroSoc, which is not the most originally named drink ever. That gets pride of place here as the sort of most famous one for us anyway. So in the very first space race here, I assume the guild probably started this rule that you had to have at least one person who wasn't drinking, and that was Tony here, and that's why he was in it was an astronaut suit. I mean, this looks like maybe the end of the night. Perhaps it didn't survive that much during the whole evening. Okay, talking about newsletters. Rory mentioned that for at St Andrews. I think you said St Andrews. So we had a few, certainly. The earliest one I could find on my computer was this one over here from 1992, which is actually about 15 pages long. They clearly had more time. By the end, on this right-hand side, this was about 2 pages long. They sort of vary in length in time, but I've got a good collection of all of those dotted around. Oh, okay. T-Talking Telescope, as you've already mentioned, is an event that's still being run. any AstroSoc person will recognize that this photo of Brian Cox is actually, in the basement under pointing. That's the, all the exposed stuff at the top. And yeah, and probably I included this one on the far left here as probably actually one of the most well-attended one, I imagine, was likely Lucy Hawking, Stephen Hawking's daughter, who gave a talk in, I can't remember. As I'm standing at the front, I'll assume that that's about 2008, 2009, which was, that was really well attended, right? Because this was the space weather talk that I mentioned that I had never heard of anything about space weather when I went to the talk, and now that's what I do as a job. So there's your impact there. T-Talking Telescope led us on to some bigger things, and we had like Space Day and various other name days where we did things on a Saturday for a lot of people. And I guess that culminated in a stargazing live event on campus, which we had about 1,500 people come to. And you can see this was in the top left here, this was the queue to get into the event on the Wednesday evening. We held this. And then we had these telescopes set up outside Old Joe. This photo is sort of interesting because clearly there's no real observing going on because of this giant light in the corner, because this was me doing my interview on the BBC. So this is entirely faked, just so we could take a photo. It was actually had the magical AstroSoc rarity of having a major event and clear skies for observing. So that really was the culmination of everything that went together for that stargazing live event. And that was, these are big things that AstroSoc had put on. Okay, I thought I'd share pictures of the Grub telescope because it's my favorite. So there's a selection of photo here. So the Grub telescope on the roof was built in, well, the mount was built in 1882. The refractor was built in 1910. It has had a fairly, ups and downs of its life. You can see in actually 2003 up here, there were originally 2 refractors mounted in parallel, and it was a different color. What went wrong was that pigeons made it its home. And there is, in fact, that picture in the middle is from inside the Grub. And to overcome that problem, a shed was built to protect it. That shed had an open back, and so it did not protect it. And after cleaning it all out, pigeons decided to fill it up again with things that weren't just eggs. And that was not so pleasant. But then in 2000, I guess it was 5 into 2006, with the University of Birmingham Alumni Fund gave us £5,000 to refurb the telescope. And then there's a couple of pictures here from later of using it. But this is, a great instrument that's been around for a very, very long time. Okay, yeah, these are just a few random things I picked out. As I said, I was searching through all of my files and I came to these. So on the left, we've got some observation of the Leonids meteor shower in 1963. AstroSoc spent the whole night over a few days recording every meteor they saw, changed the piece of paper every 2 hours to account for rotation. And this work was, later published, and it's a nice thing that we had. They were in, this is the committee in 1990 in Astronomy Now. In 1994, Patrick Moore came to the annual dinner and gave the talk then. And then on the right-hand side here, I took this. This is just the 2004 Venus transit. So I mentioned there was 2012 obviously as well, but I couldn't find a 2012 picture on my computer. And then you mentioned right at the start there about AstroSoc being the oldest society in the university. It absolutely is. Here are the income, and this is the Treasury report from 1908 for AstroSoc on the right here. On the left is the letter that was sent out to say that your society membership was due from 1909. But so you can see in 1908, there were 43 ordinary members and 6 external members of AstroSoc. And I know I've got a few hundred of these documents, scanned copies of them. We have a letter from Professor Pointing, saying how he enjoyed his night observing with the Astronomy Society, and all manner of bits and pieces like that. So it's absolutely the oldest society. It was here at least 40 years before the Guild existed. And I have, over the years, reminded the Guild of that repeatedly. So it's good to keep track. I don't know exactly when it started. I mean, the university had only been going 7 years when this expense report is from, but that's the oldest document that I could find while powering through some files earlier today. So yeah, that's all. I just thought I'd share a few random pictures there and any bit of interesting history from the last 113 years or so. I'll stop that so you can move on. You can ask me anything you want later or at the end.
I have to say that has to be one of the most exciting things I have seen all year so far, the oldest documents of AstroSoc, and it makes me feel really happy that this is the society that we all get to be involved with. And thank you so much for your effort in putting together these slides. And it was I'm sure our members have really enjoyed it. Moving on to
I enjoyed finding them all.
That's great. So we can now move on to our next segment, where we will be asking the questions that our audience members have sent to us in advance of the session. Luke, would you like to start off?
Yep, okay. So the first question from our audience is, what kind of career pathways are available for engineers in this sector? Sean, I was wondering if you'd be able to answer that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I can make up what I think that means. I mean, if you mean engineers currently or going into engineering jobs, which way around do you mean there?
I think probably going into engineering jobs is the way the question is directed.
Right, that makes more sense. I'm more qualified to answer that. So I think the biggest thing that I learned post PhD even is what engineering is. Maybe that's embarrassing to say that I didn't really know before. I guess we have stereotypes of what we assign to different roles. And absolutely engineering and, aerospace engineering in particular, which the University of Birmingham now runs an undergraduate degree in, is absolutely huge. And I think you have to just recall that really engineering covers any of them, maybe maths we do, physics, any of those things that you are then applying to the real world is how I then basically define engineering. So in terms of careers and scope, it's absolutely massive. The UK wants to grow its space arm and its space industry, to a like 10% global share by 2030. To meet that, you would have to have every student from every type of engineering discipline in the whole of the UK going to space every year to meet those numbers. That's not going to happen. So there is a massive scope for people who are interested and smart in space to move from perhaps the theoretical and that kind of physics world, but into the aerospace industries. So I think the opportunity is absolutely huge, and this is the time that we're going to invest. The politics aside, we know that the UK, one of the things it can do and it can do well is space. And that's going to be from an engineering point all the way down to really low level research. And we need to cover all of that. So I think the opportunities are colossal to go into this kind of thing, sort of engineering wise, but you don't need to think that you're stopping being a physicist or stop being a mathematician to become an engineer. It doesn't really work like that. The boundaries all just sort of blur together, I guess. That'll be my ranting answer to that question.
That is brilliant. Thank you for that really detailed answer, and yeah, for the insight into actually just how amazing the opportunities are nowadays. It's certainly something that I was not aware of, so thank you.
Our next question is it true that Jupiter's moon Europa has an ocean of groundwater? how likely is it that it is alive or ever developed, and how can that be verified? Amaury, would you like to answer that? I believe you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So indeed, it looks like there is an ocean under the ice of Europa. In fact, it looks like there is one under the ice of Ganymede as well, and under the ice of Enceladus, which is around Saturn. So whether it's alive or not is a big question. The search for life outside of the Earth starts in the solar system. It's unclear. I think we will have missions going there. So there's at the moment, actually, there's someone in the School of Engineering working on a spacecraft that will visit the moon Ganymede very soon. In Enceladus and Europa, fortunately, some of the water is leaking in space because of the pressures that are built in that underground water. And so it's leaking in space, meaning that we have access to it. So hopefully soon a mass spectrometer will go through that plume. And from that, we will find if there is any organic matter, but also any signal that life can, for instance, create. For instance, if you look on Earth, every carbon chain has only an even number of carbon atoms. We don't have odd numbers. And so you have an odd even number of carbon chains that the mass spectrometer would be very easy, or would have a very easy way of detecting, but that thermodynamically you would not expect. And that would be a very good telltale sign that something funky is happening under the surface.
Well, that's really exciting to know, especially like knowing that extraterrestrial life is one of the most, most discussed fields. Anytime that you open any space-based news website, or most of the time, like especially as I was like in high school or primary school, if astronomy made it to the headlines, it was almost always because of the discoveries made and within the solar system, or maybe even beyond, with the Kepler satellite, for how extraterrestrial life may have been detected potentially. And it's nice to have some more insight on the potential methods on how that would have been.
Yeah.
Emma, would you have anything to? Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I would only say that even if we don't detect it, that's useful. It's often something that I've said is that if you don't detect life, you still learn something. One of the things we don't know is how life originates. Whether you have independent genesis, for instance, on Earth and Europa, whether they're linked, whether you need a surface for life to be created, or whether it's born underwater. You have various theories for the origin of life. Some mention undersea volcanoes, for instance. I've talked to researchers who are highly skeptical of this because of the dilution, that you have an entire ocean where you lose your matter. But then on the surface, you have other problems as well. So whether life originates in the water or on the surface, discovering or not discovering it in Europa, Enceladus, and Ganymede actually has an impact on answering that kind of question.
Oh, that's wonderful. Emma, would you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, so I thought I would demonstrate for you the skills that being an AstroSoc committee member and then PhD student will give you, which is that when I noticed that Anwaysha had very kindly written my name next to this question on the schedule, this question, which it is probably fair to say is well outside my area of expertise, I use my very valuable skill of Googling. And while I was Googling, I found out a few things which I'll just add to Anne-Marie's answer because I thought they were cool. And I hope that you will too, which is, so one of the interesting things about the ocean, which I think the consensus exists on Europa, is that obviously because Europa is much further from the sun than the Earth, the heat needed to keep the ocean as liquid doesn't come from the sun. There isn't enough heat, so the surface is icy and hard. And actually, the energy that heats the water and keeps it liquid comes from the fact that Europa is in a resonance with the other moons of Jupiter, and that means that it gets kind of squashed and squished about a bit by the gravitational attraction, which gives you sort of a kind of tectonic activity, a bit like what we have on Earth, which releases heat and keeps the water as liquid. So that's why it's a potentially exciting environment where life could possibly form. And for the second part of the question, so I was Googling the missions that are, hopefully going to go to Europa. So I think NASA has a mission called the Europa Clipper, which is supposed to launch in 2023, which probably means it will launch in 2035, something like that. That's how these things usually work. And at its closest, I think that's supposed to get 3 miles from the surface of Europa, which is pretty ridiculous. So we'll see if that works. Maybe it'll just crash into it, but you never know. And that will really be a mission to do what Anne-Marie said and to closely investigate the plumes of water that come from these under ice oceans. So that will be a test of habitability, not necessarily a search for the evidence of life. There's another proposed mission. I don't think it's been accepted yet, and I don't think it has a name, which will basically be a Europa lander. And I think the idea there is to put a microscope on it and just take pictures and see if the scientists can spot any signs of life that way. So yeah, in 20 years, maybe we'll know.
That's really exciting. And I love the way that you demonstrated your ability with figuring out some wonderful facts.
Transferable skills, everyone.
So the next question, I guess could be asked to anybody, but in particular, I'm going to focus on the PhD students here. So how difficult is it to get a physics-related job and/or position?
Who's going to start? We're 3 people here.
You.
Okay. So I believe everyone will agree that a physics degree doesn't just teach us physics. Indeed, one of the most popular thing in a physics degree is computing, mathematics. It's heavily mathematics related. So I don't have personally, I don't know about other PhD students here. I don't personally have so much job hunting. So I directly wanted to go for a PhD. But I have quite a lot of friends who went for things like data analysis based jobs. As like Emma just said, there are so much transferable skills that's going on. It can be data analysis, it can be maths, it can be like lots of things. So I had friends like going through data analysis, economy, science communication, consulting, management. Like we have a big list in our friend group that's doing different things. It can be teaching as well. And majority of people stayed in PhD. But I don't believe that, a physics degree is just basically limited with academia. So if you don't want to stay in academia, it's perfectly fine. You have lots of things to do outside. And it is a competitive field, I have to say, I believe. But in that case, your other skills, for example, like personal relations, public relations, and those type of skills will be important. So this is in fact one of the things that AstroSoc can help you, like time organization skills and those type of things will be important. Anything you guys want to add on this? I don't know.
I can add a little bit of personal experience. So when I made my applications before I graduated from my master's, I applied for PhDs, and I also applied to the European Space Agency for their young graduate trainee program. So that has an application process which is much more similar to going to work at a big technical company like BP or something like that. So there were online video interviews and a few tests and that sort of thing through several rounds. So in some ways, most of the time, the application process to go into an academic job is actually quite old-fashioned. You sort of, write a CV and a cover letter, and obviously your academic results are important, and you have an interview with a real life person, although obviously at the moment they take place on Zoom, and then somebody emails you and tells you whether you got the job. When you apply to a big company, things can look very different, and that can be, I think, a bit intimidating. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles to getting into a physicsy type job, is sort of winning this application process, I guess. But So as a couple of examples, I had a video interview with Issa, which was one of these like weird pre-recorded things. So the question pops up on the screen and there's a little timer in the corner which counts down, and you just talk to your webcam. There's nobody there watching you. And then when the time is up, the camera turns off and you move on to the next one. And then somebody watches it later and decides if they like you. So in that interview, there was a question that I just didn't understand at all, a technical question, because I was applying for something a little bit outside of physics, and I Googled the question in the reading time before I gave my answer. So there you go, Googling is a really important skill. And somehow I got through that round, and then in the actual video interview with the person on the screen who could, nod and show that they could hear me and that kind of thing. They asked me to explain something to a layman, basically, as a kind of outreachy question. And the person that I explained it to learned something from my answer. So your skills at communicating science to somebody who's not another scientist are also valuable to make sure that you can talk openly and enthusiastically about the projects that you've been involved in, and to make you appear personable and stuff like that in an interview. So I think, as Toots has said, a physics degree or a similar degree, engineering, maths, they will prepare you with so many transferable skills for technical jobs, but the application process can be scary. So just try to be enthusiastic about the stuff that you've done and the stuff that you're applying for, and that should come across.
I would probably second what's been said before by other people here. I'd add on top of that I began at the beginning of last year by applying to PhDs first and deciding that if these fell through as opportunities, then I would start to look for other careers. And this was before the majority of society collapsed in the form of COVID-19. So it was an interesting happenstance that was the case. But this means that I've only really I've had some experience in applying for teaching internships in the past, and I'd say that there's a lot of parallels between that and the way that PhDs are interviewed for, in that it's mostly person-to-person discussions about interests with a few technical questions to make sure you have the understanding. The one part I'd add is that as much as it can feel during a lot of these interviews like you're trying to be caught out, like they're trying to catch you off guard, it's worth noting that they're looking for potential, and usually the candidate that gets the job, at least from experience so far, is a person who has specific skills and specific interests which will line up with their supervisor, who they actually just generally get along with quite well. I knew at the entrance to the Oxford interviews that I'd gotten along quite well with my current supervisor, Hans Kraus. After around 15 minutes of just general discussion about the LZ experiment, his two questions at the end were, would you like to do simulations, and would you like to mess around with tanks of nitrogen? And the answer to both was a resounding yes. So maybe that's a unique experience on my part. Maybe it's something that other people have seen in the middle of interviews, that you can tell when you've really meshed with a specific subject and a specific academic, but that's my experience at least.
May I just quickly add, I don't know if everyone knew, but I'm very new into that science communication companies are actually a thing. For example, like there are actually people who are working, like basically earning money for science communication for outreach events, and they're being funded to organize such activities or tutoring, mentoring, those type of things. So there is like Astrophysics Institute that I am in right now has a full group of people working on that. And there is a former Birmingham alumni, Maria Paulito. I don't know if you guys met with her. She is also started her own science communication company, for example, after teaching in university many years. So it is actually a thing. If you really like outreach activities, if you really like outreach, it is an actual job. So that is another opportunity for you to improve yourself. And if you think that's something for you, if you enjoy like communicating with people in terms of science, you can actually go for that. Yeah.
I can contribute a little bit in terms of not entering the job market, but in internships and undergraduate experiences that you can start to get to prepare for a career in the science sector. One thing that is resounding is that even if you don't know what job you're going to head to, diversifying the experiences you have and collecting skills in different things that don't even seem relevant at the time, is going to be so helpful. Because, for example, I did an internship with a space weather organization where they were managing space satellites to track the climate and things. And I didn't know how it would come in useful because I wasn't doing the internship in physics itself. I was doing it in strategy and international relations. But then what you do when you pick up opportunities, I mean, I wasn't interested in weather, but I decided to go for it and I found out all sorts of interesting things. When you go for opportunities that you don't quite know how it's going to fit into things yet, useful things can come together. It's like a jigsaw, collecting different pieces that will be things to pick from when you go for an application. And then when you do find a graduate job you want to go for, or a PhD opportunity, if you diversify the number of things you've done, you can pick and choose to see what is it that they're looking for and how can I adapt to it. Because recently I was interviewing for a role with a space organization. Actually, this is good for undergraduates. There's an organization called the Space Generation Advisory Council, which is the United Nations representative organization for everyone under 35 in the space sector. And you can sign up with your email and get on the mailing lists and join project groups and things and get represented. And you can also apply for volunteer positions and have roles in the organization, kind of like a big version of university society. And for something like that, it's useful to have a degree in physics or a degree in engineering or experiences with university societies. But it's also useful to say, I've edited this report before, or I've spoken to these people before, or I've presented this, or I've worked on this kind of project, or I've helped on an article about space, weather and locusts. They're not actually ever looking for something specific you've done. What they're looking for is just a way to answer their question, answer their requirement. Why are you interesting? Why are you flexible? Why are you versatile? Because they can never predict what problems you're going to need to solve. All they want from you is to know that you're someone who can solve some kind of problem and can be flexible, really. And in these interviews, you get a feel for it. It's always daunting at first, but at the other end of an interview is always another person who has been in your position and is just looking for another person they can work with. As has been said before, they don't want to catch you out necessarily. It's not like a GCSE being spoken out loud, but they've got a piece of paper in front of them and they need the person who you put through to the next round needs to be able to speak. The person who you put through to the next round needs to have free time. The person you put through to the next round needs to have had an experience working in a team. They're kind of ticking off these boxes. And the questions will seem open-ended and they'll seem like they're looking to analyze every depth of your character. But really, they're just looking for one or two tangible things. And once you've got the trick of noticing which tangible things they're looking for in each interview question, you can make something useful out of the conversation. And that really helps to feel confident in interviews as well. And just at the end of the day, they don't want to have a bad conversation or a bad time. You don't want to have a bad conversation or a bad time. No one wants to feel awkward. And really, they just want to get to know you. I think that's all I have to offer. That's speaking as an undergraduate, as a third year. Collect everything you can, and then it will help you out in the future.
Thank you very much for that.
Sorry, I'm interrupting. But can I just continue with something? I mean, I know the question is asking, is it like jobs competitive to get? But I also wanted to answer if PhD is competitive or is it tough to get? So from personal experience, some people might think that you need the best grades, you need like the 4.0, I think that's the highest. I don't even know what's the highest. I think 425 is the highest. Anyway, so for some people things like having top grades is what important to get a PhD or to continue in PhD, which I completely disagree. I don't know about anyone. So basically, I didn't have the best grades, but I was very interested in going in research. I was basically in love with astrophysics module and I hated quantum mechanics. Sorry, Dan, I know you like it. Yeah. Or I was very deep into learning about basically galaxies than mathematics, basically. But I was always like very enthusiastic about my lab projects in terms of like the real research projects that when you get your PhD, what you will be actually doing. Of course, it is a plus to have good grades because, as Emma said, there is an application process, application term when you first apply to a PhD. But what's important is that there is a CV that you're also supplying for them. So there is a personal statement that you're also sending to universities, which they matter a lot. From personal experience, there was a University of Edinburgh, for example, called my tutor asking if they should invite me or not, because I didn't have good grades, but I had like quite a lot of experience with those type of activities like outreach and projects and etc. So I did have good marks for my projects because I really liked them. So that can happen. So I don't want anyone to feel discouraged or not being enthusiastic because they don't have the best grades, because you don't have to be good at everything. And if you're mildly good at the thing that you like, and if you can show that you're confident and that's enthusiastic about going towards your research, that's what it matters. So don't feel discouraged, basically, if you don't have the best grades, but you want to try your luck, you want to go for a PhD, go to make a PhD, go to have a PhD. So I deeply encourage people to go for it if you think that is for you. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll just stop.
This has been a very insightful discussion, and thank you to whoever asked this question, because this has really shed light on a lot of different aspects that many students at undergraduate level might not have come across previously. So thank you very much for that. For the sake of time, I am aware that we have reached the 1 hour mark. So in case anyone would like to leave right now, please do feel free. I do not want to keep you longer than you are available. However, if you are available, it would be really nice if you could continue on. And we just have one more question. And for the audience members, if we have not been able to get to your question, apologies for that in advance. We will do our best to get to the question some point in the near future. We will get you an answer. It just might not be tonight, but we will get you an answer. Our final question is from Alex, and the question is, I am a chemistry student, but would like to study astrochemistry in the future. However, I am unsure about how I could get into a field considering it isn't covered at the university. Do you have any insight into how I could potentially work towards my goal? Would anyone like to answer that? It's an open-ended question to anyone who would want to answer that.
I mean, I can say something in that I take PhD students every year, and basically no one's ever done any space weather or space environment thing because it's rarely on a university syllabus, and we don't care. I mean, maybe in some fields there's some really, I don't know, really important specific thing people have to learn, but degrees vary so much across the country, across the world, that no one knows exactly what you want to have the prerequisites. So you just want to take people who are interesting and smart and have shown that in some way, and then you believe that they can fill in the blanks and you learn it. So you want, the topic I did my PhD in, I knew absolutely nothing about because I did an undergrad in pure maths, so I don't really know anything about physics. So I just pretended to, and then caught up afterwards. So I mean, I think what I look for in PhDs is, in PhD students, is demonstrable skills of being interested in something. If you're particularly interested in, in a band or whatever, I'm more interested in actually this person likes taking apart amplifiers and just messing around with stuff. If you're interested in astronomy, I'm interested in seeing that you're actually interested and you're taking little low 240p resolution pictures on a webcam and stitching them together. That's just an interesting skill set. I don't really care what you're doing. It's just demonstrating that you're interested in something. And that can be hard. And what I'm really not interested in is, I play football and it's taught me how to be a great team player. I mean, no, it hasn't. You play football because you enjoy football, and we're not all idiots. We know what people try to write as tricks. if you play football because you like to analyze the statistical distribution of goals scored, then I'll give you a PhD right now. I mean, that sounds fun. So I in terms of if you want to move into some field, I mean, I think the question was from chemistry to like astrochemistry. I mean, those are so closely related. I wouldn't worry about it even slightly. And you know, if you want to diversify from chemistry into particle physics, sure, it might be a bit harder, but if you can demonstrate some interest and keenness, those opportunities are there. So yeah, you should definitely just go for it. And jumping around gives you a good broad knowledge base, right? I think that's really helpful anyway. So, but I mean, maybe Amori's got some other experience from PhD hiring, so maybe he's a good one to ask as well.
Oh, no, overall it's similar. I think being interested and driven is important for research and for a PhD. I think if that's a topic that interests you, find which astrochemistry department they are and apply. I would even suggest, send an email ahead of time of the application, start a discussion. Depending on which year you're in, ask if they have a summer research job to offer you or something like that, so that you know whether that really interests you, and you can get to grips with the topic ahead of your PhD.
Yeah, I'm going to just really reinforce that point. If you want to apply for, and it's not true for everyone, but for me, I so want the student to email me before making a formal application. It's so important to me, and I think it's really useful to reach out before you bother putting in an application and have a chat and see if it's right for you, because it might not be, and you might not like it or that. You just need to have that informal chat first. I think that's really, really helpful, and that's not practical for everybody. And the current situation makes that harder because I don't think any Zoom chat is informal. I think any conversation on Zoom takes on an added level of formality, which can be hard. But yeah, I think reaching out beforehand is really important.
Thank you so much for those insights. And since we are on the topic of astrochemistry, I would like to point out that our last Tea Talk and Telescope was given by a researcher and professor in astrochemistry from Sheffield. So do check that out on our YouTube channel, and I will be posting the link in the chat shortly. Unfortunately, due to time, we will have to draw the session to a close. So in case you have any live questions, do type them into the chat. And as some of our panelists have very wonderfully left their emails in the chat, they might be able to answer your questions as well. It just occurred to me like 2 minutes before the session started that we have not taken a single photograph or any screenshot photograph of any of our AstroSoc events this year on Zoom. So I was wondering if we could potentially do that. If you are comfortable with having your camera on for a photograph, and it might be shared on our social media pages potentially. So if you're comfortable with that, just give me a thumbs up and I can go ahead with the screenshot. Perfect, Toots, thumbs up, perfect. Okay, cool. Then in 3, 2, 1. There we go. Hopefully I got the screenshot now. I'm just gonna paste it somewhere before I lose it. There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. And for our final closing remarks, just a little bit of some announcements that we have to make on behalf of AstroSoc. You can check out who we are in detail, or just to get a glimpse of what we have done in the past, if you want to refer to it again in the future, from our EPS website, so the School of Engineering and Physical Sciences website. Link is in the chat. Additionally, if you would like to follow us on Facebook, that is where we post a lot of our updates regularly for our events, and we even promoted a lot of this event on Facebook. Do check out our Facebook page. Link is in the chat once again. And we would highly, highly like to encourage you to buy our membership if you really enjoyed this event. It is our audience support that keeps us going, and it really keeps us motivated to bring some events like this and even more in the future for you. Hopefully in the next academic year, we'll have some more in-person events. So we would love to see you in person and go on socials together and observe the night sky together in our observation nights. So do try to get our membership. It's only £4 per year and has a bunch of benefits along with it. Lastly, do not forget to check out our YouTube channel where we have uploaded countless, at least it has to be about 20 to 30 videos by now, over the last 6 months, ranging from talks on astrochemistry to galactic evolution, space weather, space technology, you name it and it's there pretty much. So do check that out on our YouTube channel. And finally, thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking some time out from their evening on a weekday to share with their experiences with AstroSoc. So if everyone can maybe unmute their mics for a second, and if we can have like a virtual round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much.
You guys.
Thank you for inviting us. I don't know about the others, but I've had a nice time. So
Yeah, same.
Thank you.
And I strongly recommend going to AstroSoc committee. Run for roles.
yeah.
We do have our AGM coming up, and we will be advertising those again on our social media pages. And if you buy a membership, you will be added to our official mailing list through the Guild, and you will receive all these updates in your inboxes directly. And with that being said, thank you so much once again for your time this evening, and I will stop recording now.